Hey, what's up with it, guys? Hey, welcome back to another video. Now, this is gonna be an Assassination Rogue burst guide. Now, this is gonna be mostly focused on PvP, but it is relevant in PvE for single target type situations. If that's what you're looking for, a lot of this should be relevant either way, but it's mostly PvP focused. So first, let's go ahead. I'm gonna show you guys the talents. We'll go through kind of the conduits, all that kind of stuff, how it works, and then we'll go through the actual rotation. Keep in mind, I do have trophies showing down here at the bottom of my frame if you want to play back or slow-mo back any of the actual opener. Feel free to do that. I'll put timestamps down below like always. And if you do like this content, hit the thumbs up, hit the sub button, let me know so I know, what content to do moving forward if this is stuff that you guys are interested in and enjoying. So let's go ahead and get into the talents here. Now, the only thing really worth mentioning on my gear, you can see we're 194 eye level, so nothing too crazy. Still kind of really working on gearing this character up. We've been 60 for a few days now. But we do have the legendary Sigil of the Master Assassin. Now, this is a very, very integral part to this burst rotation, and this setup doesn't probably come to much of a surprise, as this is kind of the go-to legendary in general. On the top row here, the 15 row, you really have two options. Elaborate Planning is actually going to give you a little bit higher burst in this burst setup. Master Poisoner is going to give you a little more utility and kind of continued damage, just because it's, if you're using deadly poison, it scales very well. So these are two options I think are really these two, and this is going to be more burst focused. This is going to be more utility consistency when it comes to DPS. So, pick your poison, pun intended. 25 row, Subterfuge is the go-to here because of the synergy that it has with our legendary. 30 row, Marked for Death, also kind of no other alternative here because this is just so strong, giving us instant full kidney or double envenom. There's just so many cool things you can do with Marked for Death. So that's the go-to here. 35 row, pick any of these that you want. I think it is worth mentioning some of these talents do scale differently once you go into PvP. Leeching Poison is actually 12% leech in PvP. So this is actually pretty significant. This is nothing to kind of scoff at. Cheat Death is very good, kind of set it and forget it, don't worry about it type thing. Elusiveness, I think, is the best if you're good enough to use this well. I am not good enough at using this well yet, so I don't run this, but I think most high-rated rogues do actually run Elusiveness in PvP. It's just very strong defensive. On the 40 row, Internal Bleeding is the only real option here, in my opinion. These other ones are okay. Prey on the Weak is reduced to 5% in PvP. And Iron Wire is an option, but I just don't think it's as good as Internal Bleeding. I think this is the better of the options, giving us a really potent bleed on top of our kidney, which you're kind of always using your kidney to set up your kill windows, presumably anyway. So this just has really good synergy with the overall gameplay we're trying to do. 45 row, Alacrity is the go-to here. Exsanguinate, I think that's how you would say that word, is cool, but kind of feels a little bit clunky. I haven't quite figured out a way to utilize this yet. And Venom Rush would be nice if we were having any issues with energy, but we're not really having any issues with energy with this specific setup, but you can run Venom Rush as well if you like that playstyle. On the 50 row, Poison Bomb is the only go-to for a single target, just very, very strong. A little bit of RNG, if you have a full 5 combo point spender, it'll be a 20% chance to proc, so it's a little bit random, but when it does proc, it's very, very nice and does a good chunk of damage, especially if we can get a proc or two in this setup. Onto the PvP talents, the only one that is important or kind of integral to this setup is System Shock. This is going to give us basically a bonus hit of damage when we cast Envenom. The tooltip right now says 558 nature damage. This is contingent on us having Garrote, Rupture, and Poisons on the target, and the Envenom has to be a 5 combo point Envenom. So there's a lot of criteria there. However, this does hit for bonus nature damage, as well as reduce the target's movement speed really significantly for 2 seconds, kind of working as like a pseudo root type situation. What I want to mention with this that's really significant is this is nature damage. This big burst setup is we're basically stacking our bleeds, using Shiv to amplify our nature damage, and then pumping our Envenom two Envenom, you know, back to back, which is nature damage, as well as having system shock also being nature damage, all of this being amplified by the shiv damage, and that's kind of the idea. So system shock is a really only significant part from a single target perspective. You can run, there's a lot of cool honor talents here. Mind numbing poison's decent, creeping venom is decent, maneuverability is good, smoke bomb is always good, death from above if you really wanted that, but I haven't been a huge fan of it. But system shock's the only one that's important from a DPS perspective, but lots of options here for the alternative couple slots in your honor talents. Now, the other thing worth mentioning is I am using the on-use trinket here. I have a macro. There's two macros I have set up. One is a Vendetta Garrote macro because Vendetta is off the global cooldown. I also have a Sepsis, Blood Fury racial, and trinket use. So I basically pop my trinket and my racial when I cast Sepsis in this rotation. I think that's really the only kind of significant macro setup that we are doing. So let me show you, this was like a little quick burst we had done before this. You can kind of see the damage spread prior to going through this rotation, so you can kind of get a better idea of it. Our poisons are doing a good chunk of our damage. You can see system shock here. I had 2 crits because it's a guaranteed crit with this setup of what we're doing, and they hit for almost 3k a piece. The reason this is so much more than the tooltip is because we have shiv up on the target, which is increasing the nature damage done by 20%. Now, you can see the damage spread here. We have Envenom and Sepsis being our, you know, upfront big chunk of our damage up here. It's important to mention these are both nature damage. So against targets like warriors or pallies or DKs, really, you know, high armor targets, you will still be able to hit really hard with this. You do need to be aware of things like Cloak of Shadows or AMS or things like that because it is magic damage. So you have a lot of damage coming from the actual nature damage portion of your abilities. Now, I should talk about conduits and stuff real briefly here before we get into this rotation. I am Night Fae myself. We're running Naya with this setup, but this is a fresh alt and we do not have all these things unlocked. I am running Septic Shock, which does increase our sepsis damage. That's part of why my sepsis damage is so high in that breakdown. The other conduit I would be running ideally, which I don't have access to yet, down in this second potency conduit would be the one that Shiv has an increased damage amplification for nature spells. If you're able to pair those two together, it's very, very, very potent. Keep in mind, sepsis can be dispelled. It's a magic spell, so it's not going to be guaranteed 100% of the time, but when you can pull it off, it's really fun. It's a fun play style to play with, and it does contribute a good chunk to this burst. Okay, so let's go through the basic rotation of what we're going to do. I'll kind of walk you through it. I'll do it once, and then we'll kind of go through and explain kind of the bits and pieces of it. Now, out of stealth, we're going to Garrote into ambush, into rupture. Then we are going to mutilate. This mutilate is going to give us 4 combo points because we still will have the crit guaranteed buff from our legendary up. So we'll be at 4 out of 5 combo points. This is a little bit clunky at this point in the rotation because you really want to cast 2 more single point generators. So you kind of overcap on combo points, but there's not really a way around it since you get 4 combo points with both mutilate hits critting the way that it works. So if you're not Night Fae, for example, you could kind of take out sepsis, whatever you have, you can remove this. And basically where I cast sepsis in this rotation, you could just cast Shiv and forget sepsis and just go on with the rotation. So if you are not Night Fae, just basically remove that out of the rotation and it's all fine. Then once we cast Shiv, we are going to Kidney Shot, Vanish, Ambush, Envenom, then we're going to mark for death, Envenom again. So the idea is we're getting two ambushes back to back and 2 envenoms back to back. So those 4 globals will all be a guaranteed crit because of our Vanish. So you are having to use Vanish in this situation to really maximize your burst, but I don't think that that's particularly uncommon. Also, it's important to keep in mind if you're playing Assassination, having Garrote and Rupture up on a target and being able to like reset and have those bleeds still on a target is very feasible. So while I'm doing kind of a more laid out version of this burst, you can obviously do bits and pieces of this in, you know, different sequences if you can't get this whole rotation off. Very commonly, I kind of do the same setup with like a shiv into like a double envenom kind of setup, is like kind of like a mini burst, if you will. But this is the way that I've been able to figure out to kind of maximize the burst, and then you guys can kind of take bits and pieces of this to adapt it to actual, you know, real-time gameplay. So again, kind of a faster overview. Garrote into ambush into rupture. This is going to be, I think, a 4-point rupture. And so that basically once we cast this Garrote, it's going to be like a 15-second window we're trying to fit this in, because we want to basically do all this burst before Garrote runs out in a perfect world. So Garrote, ambush, rupture, mutilate, sepsis, shiv, kidney shot, vanish, ambush, ambush, envenom, mark for death, envenom. That's going to be the rotation. Now I am going to, like I said, the macros that I have here is I have Vendetta into Garrote, and then I also have Sepsis with all of our unused stuff. So in the opener, I'm going to Vendetta when I do the initial Garrote off the bat. Now we are running Deadly Poison for this setup. You can run Wound Poison or anything like that if you had to. Tonsura, yeah. And I am running Elaborate Planning for this kind of sake of showing this. Okay, let's go. Here we go. So we spiked up to 24k DPS right there in that opener. I don't know if you guys were able to see that. But so you see this damage breakdown, right? We have 2 Envenoms back to back hitting right around 12k. Keep in mind this is with 194-ish eye level. Our Sepsis dot is doing a ton of damage here. You can see the crits are critting for around 3k. This is because of the Shiv amplification, the Conduit that we have as well, and getting a bunch of crits. Half of them are critting because of, because of a portion of that damage occurring while we are invis, right? When we vanish, it triggers basically for 4 seconds right after we vanish. All of our dots are critting, and we vanish basically as we cast that kidney shot. We have sepsis up, we have our poisons up, we have Garrote, we have rupture up, and we have internal bleeding from the kidney. So then when we vanish, all of those dots for 4 seconds are all guaranteed critting, as well as getting 2 ambushes and 2 envenoms all in that short window of time. So that's the kind of overview idea of exactly how this works. You can see Septic Shock. I had 2 casts there, hit for 3,200 apiece. Deadly Poison was a good chunk of our damage, but with this specific burst setup, it's not massive. So like I said, if you run Wound Poison, it's not that problematic. But we did spike over 24k DPS in that opener, you know, as we kind of finished our second Envenom there. So this is very potent, very strong, very bursty. So like I said, kind of before the rotation, I'll show you, like, if you're kind of just, you know, running around or whatever, and you don't have the ability to set up this massive big burst setup. The other kind of alternative that I'll do is I have 4 combo points, and then we will go into like a Shiv, Kidney, and then you can kind of go into like a something like this, right, where you build up combo points where there's like little mini bursts, right? You go to Shiv to amplify the nature damage, you Kidney to allow yourself the time to basically build up 5 combo points, and Venom, mark for death in Venom. You can also do something similar, doing a mark for death Kidney, and then, you know, using your energy to build up combo points and just getting 1 Envenom off. There's all kinds of ways you can kind of twist and weave these combinations together, but this, like I said, is the most potent single target, like 1 burst cast sequence I was able to come up with as Assassination. So let's do it one more time. We have our cooldowns back up. This is something that is basically a 2-minute setup, because you really ideally want to have Vendetta and Vanish, but if you're trying to 1v1 people, this is just insane damage. Okay, so let's go ahead and go. So you see same thing there. It's like 100. I don't know what the timing is of how long that takes to do all of that exactly, but we're doing over 100K every single time. The other thing that's important to understand and keep in mind is that the pro or the benefit, I would say, to Assassination in general is you have higher consistent damage, because so much of your damage is coming from your bleeds and your poisons that you shouldn't theoretically be able to burst as high as subtlety, right? Because you're more of a consistent higher damage profile, and subtlety is supposed to be more bursty. So the fact that we can pull off any kind of significant burst like this is really promising, I think, for Assassination coming back to being more popular. I haven't seen hardly any Assassination rogues at all, and I think it's just a lot of people haven't taken the time to kind of figure out ways of doing burst combos when we're talking about Shadowlands content, but I could be wrong. I haven't played subtlety, so it's hard for me to really compare the two, but this is a very, very strong burst combo. It's been a lot of fun to mess with in PvP, so hopefully you guys find this helpful. If you have any tweaks or adjustments or things that I might have left out or, forgotten to mention or whatever, please leave them down in the comments below and correct me on anything that I said that was not right or incorrect. And hopefully you guys found this helpful. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. Like always, I do appreciate it, and I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.